Okay, Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum to everyone who may start watching what we're trying to do. I have had 4 years on the Islam channel, which was absolutely amazing, an experience in Women's AM. And it just gave me a real flavor for raising awareness. I have no idea where this show is going or where these recordings will go. We don't even have a name for what we want to call it yet. So if you have any ideas for a name, then let me know. But the key thing is that this show will be different. It's not even a show. I don't know why I'm calling it a show. So these recordings will be different. It will be based on a lot of truth, as far as, you know, as far as true as we can be to ourselves. We're going to talk about things that people don't like. We're going to warn that these recordings may cause offense or they may trigger you, but a lot of what I'm aiming on talking about is about stuff that doesn't get talked about. It's not a very good sentence, but it will all become apparent. So without further ado, I want to introduce my first interviewee. You know, alhamdulillah, I met her with the lovely Shahina and Farah on Women's AM. And that's one of the blessings of doing the show for 4 years, is I met so many amazing, inspirational women. Mayam is going to talk to you a little bit about herself. But she's the most inspirational person I've met, and I'm just so happy to have you in my life. And I think I can call you a friend now, Mayameen, isn't that right?
Yes.
Oh, no, tell us about you.
It's an honor to be. Yeah, no, I love it. I love the concept that you're trying to do. I know where you're going to take this, and it's going to be brilliant. So really exciting. A little bit about me. Where do you want me to start?
The history and how it's led you to what you're doing now, if you're comfortable, and your achievements, because I know you met a certain member of the royal family, or you got blessed by a member of the royal family.
Blessed by them. Haven't had the opportunity to meet them yet because of COVID.
Yes. Curse the COVID.
You know, inshallah, hopefully, curse the COVID, that will happen. So okay, a little introduction then. So my name's Mayameen. You can call me Maya, know me as Maya. Most people, it's easier. So when did my journey start? Probably back in 2011, when I started to get into working and supporting women of sexual violence, so in particular female genital mutilation, domestic violence, sexual abuse and rape. And so that's kind of how the journey started. That then progressed into many fantastic opportunities, speaking, public speaking, TedX, great opportunities, which, you know, allowed me to establish my own organisation and my private practice, which is trauma recovery and training, providing training to professionals. Backstory came only in 2018, which is when I shared publicly the passion behind what I was actually doing, which was because I was lived experience child sexual abuse survivor, which hadn't been obviously talked about through the period of my career lifespan. And people are always a little bit like, oh, you know, don't quite get you, don't get where you're at, there's something about you, there's, you know, there's a bit more to you than what you let on. And obviously, so in 2018 I waived my right to my anonymity because my father was being released from prison. He'd been sentenced to 10 years for his abuse and rape on me, and he was being released after 6 years because I couldn't get the protection that I believe I was, you know, should have had. I decided to speak out, and of course that then went viral in the press because of the work that I'd already been doing previously, and then was part of a Channel 5 documentary, and leading on through, again, amazing opportunities from that, and being able to make change in policies. Their first ever child refuge is still being in discussion within the government in the Senedd in Wales. And then so 2020 October, just skipping us quickly forward there, because that backstory we might go into in another recording, maybe another topic where we can get a little bit deeper on that. 2020 Queen's Birthday Honours Award, BEM, British Empire Medal, for my services to child victims of sexual abuse. So that's the journey so far. And so now where I'm heading, I've had my private practice where I've been working with adult women who have been through sexual violence or subjected to trauma. But actually now where I'm at my stage of life right now, where I'm sitting, is I'm kind of directing my journey into working with teens, those who have had trauma, have had troubling backgrounds. It's affecting their learning development. Maybe they've been excluded from school. And so that's where I'm at now. So I still work with women. I still run my trauma recovery program, which actually I've now been able to train some facilitators so that we can get the program really out there into the world. But my career is just slowly now as I'm working towards teens in trauma, because I feel like it's a missing area. So
And that's
a very short cap of me.
That's why I called you inspirational, because like when I heard your when I first heard your story, I don't know if you remember my reaction, but my reaction was, huh? Like because it just shows how much inner peace that you have regardless of your circumstances and what's happened to you, and that in itself is like moment. Like, what's your secret? So alhamdulillah,
how do you function?
Yeah, how do you function? Although that would have come across as quite offensive. How do you function? Clearly you've been selected by Allah as a vessel for worthy of this cause, so amazing. But before we get into, because the subject that we want to talk about today is the kids we ignore, teen trauma, and there's no, this, like I said, it's habit, isn't it? I keep referring to it as a show. This is not a show, this is just a chat to raise awareness, and if it helps, because we'll go into help later on. But before we get into the subject that we've kind of decided on together, what I want to ask you a question, and if it's uncomfortable to answer, just let me know. But why do you believe you didn't get the protection that you deserved?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. So when my father was sentenced, obviously we get the anonymity. That's, we get offered that, and that's great, and we take that. When he was due up for parole, so he was due up for parole, trying to remember all my dates now, make sure that they're correct, in 2015, 16 and 17. So around 2015, it was parole board like, it's not happening, he's not coming out on parole. 2016, he's not coming out on parole. He just was not safe enough to be let out. And then 2017 comes back. So, every year I'm waiting to find out, have parole allowed him to come out into the public. 2017, no, straight out, he's not coming out on parole. And then 2018, I get the phone call and they're like, our hands are tied. He's served 6 years. So he served over his half sentence. He's coming out. So what happens is when they're on, he comes out on a 6 months licensing, although his sentence doesn't actually officially end until now, 2021. So he comes out in 2018.
Is that
and he
for
gets
good
just
behavior?
6 months. Because he served half his sentence by law. Because obviously, though he was sentenced to 10 years, the law states, doesn't it, they serve half, they get time from on remand and whatever. So he'd served what they class as his sentence.
So then what's the point of giving a sentence? Why not just sentence someone?
There is absolutely no point. This is the issue. This is the petition that I did to the government. There was absolutely no point in putting into the victim's head that you've got 10 years when actually you've got 5, you've got half of that, you've got the time taken off that he was spent in, in remand, you've got all of this stuff that's taken off of his sentencing, and actually he's coming out to serve the rest of his remaining sentence in the public, in society. So when he was released in 2018, he was released with what they called a 6 months licensing condition. So basically what that in theory, means is he can't mess up within 6 months, right? Because if he does, he's going back into prison. So for 6 months, he's then given his conditions where he's not allowed to contact me, he's not allowed to come near the area, etc., 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 right? But that's only for 6 months in theory. So when I turned around and said to my victim liaison officer, so what happens after 6 months? Well, nothing. If he hasn't messed up in those 6 months, nothing. He's free to continue his sentencing in the society. So I was like, but
then that's not a sentence.
That
that's
you couldn't
just
protect me from.
that's not
right.
sentence.
But this is also a man, Lena, who they couldn't protect me from whilst he was in prison, right? So whilst he was in prison, he wasn't allowed contact with me. He wasn't allowed to send cards or anything. And he did. He got birthday cards out sent to my children. He was sending, you know, people that he'd met in prison to try and drop letters to my address. So they couldn't protect me to a certain level whilst he was in prison. So how on earth do you think you're going to be able to protect me when he's out in the society? So that's why after the 6-month licensing condition had expired, I decided to waive my anonymity and make him public, put him in the press, basically, because my children deserve to be protected. And what actually happened was, with licensing conditions, they will tell him which areas he's not allowed to go in. So in theory, providing him with where I'm at, where I'm located, right? So I was like, okay, so you're going to put those conditions on him. So that's going to give him an idea of where I'm actually based. Am I allowed to know where he is?
No,
you're not. Right. So what about me wanting to protect my children and not walking into the same area where he may be? Maybe I don't want to do that. You know, it's no vigilante here. It's all about me wanting to protect myself and my children. No, that's not allowed. So I said, right, so how then can I make sure that this man doesn't try to come close to me or my children? So I spoke out. And that's why I personally flawed.
There's so many frustrations. It's so fun. I just finished watching the almost a 3-hour documentary, the James Bulger story. I don't know if you did you watch it?
I haven't watched it yet. No.
Okay, please watch it, and then we can have another chat about that, because there's so many things that scream. There's so many similarities that scream, and what frustrated me at the end is that there was this haggling of the sentencing. So they got 6.5, then it went up to 7 because they, you know, the mum and the family were fighting. Then they went up to Michael Howard, who was the Home Secretary at the time, and he managed to get it up to 15, but then the court system refused that and brought it back down to 6.5. So basically these children were released when they were 18, so they never actually served any time in an adult prison. And actually, maybe we can talk about this leading into our subject about teen trauma, because, and I'm sorry, I apologize, this is going to be a bit of a spoiler, and I know you haven't watched it, but I mean, it is a matter of public record anyway. But Robert Thompson did his time in the children's correctional center or detention center, and then they were released, much like your father, on a lifelong parole. So they had to report in. They wouldn't just be free technically. Now, Robert Thompson disappeared. He went on to live his life. He never reoffended. He never got in trouble again. But John Venables went on to break the conditions of his parole over and over and over again, to the point where the last one, he was found with images of child abuse, both sexual and violent, that he made himself on his computer. So clearly this man was not safe to be let out into society. So, and it's really funny because when I watched the Harry and Meghan interview this week as well, she said that she left because she was worried about protecting her son Archie as well, and having that protection in place. Now, I know there's a debate as to how true it was, and how I mean, for me, that's not the point. The point is that, you know, after listening to your story, is that you made a decision pretty much like Harry and Meghan to out their issues as a form of protection. And that's pretty much what you did. Yeah.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, if there is a man who is not being accepted for parole on 3 occasions over 3 periods of the year, but then the hands are tied and they have to release him, that says to me that you're actually releasing somebody that you yourselves don't believe is safe to be in society. Because if you believed him to be safe, you would have released him on his first parole.
So what advice can you give for women and children in the position that you were in?
Get a really good advocate, get a really good victim liaison support officer.
Okay, I'm going to take notes.
Because what is so flawed in the system is that many women don't even realize that they can continue a victim liaison support right up until the day. I mean, it is frustrating because you do lose your victim support when they come out and they finish their licensing conditions. But if you've got a really good victim liaison officer, they can actually guide you in the right direction. They can guide you to the right places. They can make you feel just a tiny little bit safer than what you wouldn't, than what you be feeling if you were literally stranded on your own. And I've worked with so many women who will say to me, well, I didn't even have a victim. I've not even got a victim liaison officer. And I'm like, right, you can access a victim liaison officer at any point of the sentencing, at any point of the journey, at any point, but very often what will happen is when the first process starts of going to court, then you might get offered a victim support worker, and at the time you might just be like, no, I've got my family, I'm fine, etc. So okay. You don't really understand the concept of this victim support worker. And actually I didn't, for the first 4 years, had no contact with my victim liaison officer. And then when I started to realize that things were starting to get serious, I was like, right, where's my victim liaison officer? Why have they not been in contact with me? Why have I not had my regular yearly check-ins, etc.? And I pushed myself, and I made all the necessary phone calls, and I made sure that I advocated and got myself the correct victim liaison support officer.
But you have that inner strength. There, isn't it frustrating that people who are already in trauma have to find the strength to battle against the trauma, the very trauma that they're facing in the first place? It's like there's so many layers of, I mean, I want to use the word hypocrisy because it feels really hypocritical. He can know where you are, but you can't know where he is, just in case you hurt him. And then now you're saying that you can have the support, but you've got to find it yourself. It's not just automatically there for you. We want to make society better, but you have the people who need the support are the ones who have to fight for the support. It's so many, it feels like double standards. Like it's no wonder that we have the society that we have. I mean, I put a post earlier on today when they discovered the remains of Sarah Everard. Is it Everard? I think
Everard,
yeah. And and there was a tweet, I can't remember who it was by, but she said, who turns their earbuds down when they're walking, who always crosses the road to walk on the light side of the road, who always sticks to the main routes, who swaps their heels for their trainers when they're on their way home. So many of us do these things, like I know women who, I mean, you and I are going to have a very honest discussion about hijab on a later episode. But I know women who remove their, whatever your stance on hijab is, I've said when I was on Women's AM many times that I struggle with it, and it's not indicative of my relationship with Allah, but I do struggle with it. But besides the point, women take it off to feel safe to walk down. It's so,
and it's always about protecting your daughter instead of educating your son.
Absolutely.
And the issue, isn't it? Women are meant to take the forefront to protect themselves, and there's so much emphasis on women should be doing, like you said, making sure that you're walking where there's the lamps and the lights and it's more visible, and not having and walking on the main road,
changing carriages on the train as well to make sure you're not alone.
And that's what we're now saying to I don't have daughters, I have sons, but I can imagine that's what many mums are saying to their daughters before they're leaving the door, before they're going out the door, saying, make sure you do this, make sure you do that, make sure you do that. But are we turning around and am I saying to my son, make sure you don't attack a woman today, please? Make sure you leave those girls alone. They have no right to you. You cannot touch them. That is not your privy.
Is my lack of hijab my sexual problem, or is it just your gaze that where there's an issue?
Well, this is the issue, isn't it? And there needs to be more focus around educating our sons on what they should be doing as opposed to what our daughters should be doing in order to protect themselves. And this is where society has gone wrong. And this, if you even look at my situation and many others out there, is that I'm having to make sure that I'm protecting myself, because the services that are out there can't protect me any longer. And And you know, and I think that's why so many victims, especially of child sexual abuse, will find it hard to make a disclosure, because what are they making a disclosure for? You know, I often have said many times, I felt safer when he was in my life than I do now that he's out of it. You
Oh,
know,
that's
and
really
that's
interesting.
yeah. And I've
Was
always said
it
it.
the
I've
element of
always said it.
was it the element of control, of always knowing where he was and what
Yeah,
he was
knowing where he
doing?
was, knowing what he was doing, knowing that he was around me, you know. And when you go and you sentence somebody for, let's say he spent his 6 years in prison, I don't know that man that's in prison. I don't know what his thoughts are anymore. I don't know what he's believing, thinking, concocting. I don't know. And then you're going to release him into society, and I still don't know this man, and I don't know where he is, and I don't know what his plans, I don't know how his experiences have been in prison, I don't know what his mindset is anymore. And yeah, I'm supposed to feel safe. Well,
Oh gosh, it's the complete opposite to what the whole point of prison is to make the victim feel safe, that the person that hurt you is put away and can't hurt you anymore. But isn't it funny that actually it's the opposite that's achieved, especially in your case?
that's how I feel. Yeah, exactly how I feel, you know. And I'm sure, especially I think more for those of us that have gone through child sexual abuse from family members, parents in particular, because regardless of what's actually happened, they were in your life, you know. They were your mother, your father, your brother, your sister. So it adds a whole another level of complexity, you know, because you're used to them still being there somewhere in your environment and having a certain knowledge about them and knowing what they're up to a certain degree. And then all of a sudden, you know, I'll never forget, you know, without going too much, because it's not the topic today, but I'll never forget the day that I was sitting in the sentencing in the court and looking at this man. I turned around to look at him, and it was not my father who was sitting there. It was the now unfiltered version of the sex offender that he is. And it was
Gosh.
just like, wow, I didn't even recognize him, didn't recognize who he was. And, you know, that was quite scary, because that was no longer my father sitting there. So then when he spent those 6 years in prison, I don't know what monster he's become in there, you know, added on to what already he wanted that he was. Do you know what I'm saying, Celine?
Yeah, because you know you've been separate, so you have no inkling as to what his life was like. And you know, someone can change in 6 months, let alone 6 years. So yeah,
Yeah.
you're detached from the person.
And how bitter.
He may very well be the same person, but you don't know that, do you? Because you've been separate for so
No.
long. So yeah, well, actually, because the topic we're going to move on to is the kids that we ignore and the teen trauma. So to open the subject up, I'm going to ask you a question. And remember, like, anything can be stopped at any point. We should have created a
Yeah.
safe word. But yeah, so how do you feel about your father now?
That is such a good question. It's still very confusing. There's so much hate, and I wouldn't say, oh yeah, there's hate naturally, but there's always this fine line between love and hate.
Very fine line. It's exactly the
Because
same hormone, in fact.
yeah, and you know, there's times where I'd just be sitting there having my dinner, and I think, I wonder if he's having his dinner now. I wonder if he's eating. You know, like that natural kind of what I call the natural care, love that you should have for your father, you know, for the
So
person that,
you
you know,
have
was in
that
your life.
instinct in you.
Yeah. And then there's times where I just get so hateful and so angry and so bitter, and just, you know, so it's day by day, to be honest. And this is why, you know, I think it's really important that victims never feel guilty or shamed, or that they're a part of anything, just because they may still have that element of love for their parent, you know, regardless of what they've been through, because it's completely natural.
Okay, so because a lot of the children that your teens that you're dealing with have parents in prison, or have been in prison, or on the verge of prison. So that's why I asked that question. Because okay, so do you think so? Because there's another hypocritical topic that I get really frustrated with, and that's the topic of forgiveness. Have you?
Oh,
I know it hits a nerve with me as well, because I've done extensive research, and we get, you know, forgiveness is great, but it's not fair to make people feel guilty for not being able to forgive if they've been hurt.
I don't forgive.
Right. So, and I'm so glad. See, this is what I love about what I'm trying to do with my Instagram. And I just want honest, I just want the truth. Like, you know, there's so many fluffy, and I love Oprah.
Forgiveness is the path to healing.
Yeah. There's so many fluffy Oprah-like, and I love Oprah. I don't mean to use her name in a derogatory way because I absolutely love Oprah. But there's so many fluffy Oprah-like, you know, motivational videos.
You can't heal if you don't forgive.
Yeah, you can't.
Forgiveness
That's
is the
a good
path
one.
to
You can't heal
healing.
if you don't forgive. And I actually think that's a lot of crap.
And if you want Allah's forgiveness, then you must forgive.
Yeah. So what's your so have you forgiven him?
Right, so what's my concept? No, I don't forgive him. I have no intention to forgive him. I suffered for, I would say, many years when I converted to Islam of that. The more I tried to forgive, the more angry and bitter and more traumatized I was becoming, because people would say to me, you need to forgive for the sake of Allah, and Allah will forgive you. And I came to this, you know, light bulb moment that literally turned my life around when I sat there and said, I'm not prepared to forgive, and I will take my accountability on the day of judgment between me and Allah for that. Yeah. So please don't talk to me about forgiveness, because you have no idea and concept of what that word does to me and how much that triggers me. How I came to a place of healing was not through forgiveness, it was through acceptance. Acceptance of what, acknowledging it for what it was and not how it should have been, right? And acknowledging it that this man and what he did, I could not have changed. So I had to come to a level of acceptance. Do I forgive him? Absolutely not. And I have no intention to be forgiven. But it's taken me a lot of years, especially Islamically, to stand firm in that. And even now, to this day, when I will say, literally last month, I was saying this and I had the same thing thrown at me, but Allah is the most forgiving and you want to be forgiven. And I will, you know, I'm no scholar, so this is completely personal. And I speak from, like you, I speak from my heart. And anyone who knows me and has listened to me before knows that I would just say it as it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I can't even imagine the mercy that Allah has. I can't even imagine any, you know, we can't, can we? We can't put that kind of perspective into place. However, what I will say to you and what I believe personally is that there are some things that we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can't forgive. Okay. Yeah. We know that shirk, for example,
shirk
Allah
is one
subhanahu
of
wa ta'ala will, it has said clearly that there's, you know, there are things that, you know, people are not, that Allah will not forgive.
Yeah, now, unless you repent, unless you change your ways and repent whilst you're alive. Right. That you know, like that's, especially if it's shirk out of ignorance. Yeah.
Right. So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who I'm not even going to try to imagine, you know, how glory our creator is. And then I'm a layman. I'm just a little person. I'm a little girl, right? For example, I was a little girl, now I'm an adult woman who can't even have that kind of level of concept, you know, can't even compare even, you know, to how the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have been, you know. I'm so sinful in comparison. So you're expecting me, someone so, you know, fragile or whatever you want to say, to just forgive, like just like that. And so for me, it's not a concept that I can do that easy, right? And like you said, that's between me and Allah. Now, if my father was to, you know, to somehow magically appear on the day of judgment and he's, you know, converted to Islam or he's become a Muslim, that's between him and Allah. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I don't know that he's made that repentance. I don't know who he is. I don't know what he feels. I don't know anything. So I don't want to forgive, and I have no intention to forgive, because I don't believe that forgiveness for me is the way to heal. It does work for some things, you know, don't get me wrong.
And let's be honest, you're in your
somebody's upset me and a friend, right? We've had a falling out. I forgive them.
Yeah, that's different.
There's a level of forgiveness, right?
Yeah, let's talk about the levels, because look, as much as, because the forgiveness thing is not just about healing you. Again, no. I know we're probably going to get trolled, or I'm going to get trolled for saying this, but I don't believe that everyone deserves forgiveness. I'm so sorry.
They don't.
Like, some people have hurt me beyond to the point where it's I haven't recognized my own mental health. like it's damaged my mental health so badly, and made being a functional mum really difficult. And yeah, like why would I like so sorry. And the thing is, like, I mean, Mufti Menk said the other day, better you offend Allah than you offend a human being, because Allah is most merciful, most forgiving. It's easier for Allah to forgive you than it is for a human being to forgive you for an offense caused. And you know, I think that there's so much truth in that. And you know, if you it's for me, it's really frustrating that so much pressure is put on victims to forgive, when actually it's the perpetrator who all the blame and the shame lies on them. And for,
well, I mean, this is the other thing as well, Selena. The more I focused on forgiveness, the more I couldn't heal.
And the more bitter you because
the more
some wounds are too deep.
Bitter, but also, and also more. I felt more shame. Shame. Why can't I forgive? Why can't I forgive? What's wrong with me?
What's wrong with me? Why can't I forgive? Absolutely. When I think you've been put through enough, and these teenagers have been put through enough. And we're going to talk about one teenager in particular that you're working with, and we have to be very careful to make sure we don't, you know, release any details, and it'll all be very anonymous. But you know, after you told me his story, the last thing that person needs is to have the burden of another layer, another skill that he has to worry about on top of all the other things that he has to go through. So, you know, I'm so sorry. I'm not a scholar, but from what I've read, forgiveness is beneficial. Like, there's barakah in it. But if you don't forgive someone, especially with the offenses that you and I are speaking about, we're not speaking about, you know, saying something in a snippy voice and, you know, maybe ghosting a text now and again. We're talking about serious stuff, you know. And at the end of the day, you know, it's, for me, I've read that, you know, forgiveness is beneficial, but there's no sin on the person if they don't forgive. So I'm okay with that. Like, I'm totally at peace with that concept, because we are not, I don't think the ummah should be an ummah of people who just turn the other cheek. Because if we're consistently turning the other cheek, how are people going to learn that their behavior is not okay?
That's it. And, you know, and forgiveness is, you know, people say, well, forgiveness is not about the other person, it's actually about yourself. But for me personally, I found another way to heal, like I said, which was through acceptance. And so I don't need the concept of forgiveness on this particular situation, you know. And you make a judgment for yourself, don't you, at the end of the day? And I'm accountable for what I say and what I feel. So, and I don't want to be force and pretense and just believe that I need to, you know, to fake a forgiveness feeling on the hope that I'm going to be able to, you know, recover and heal. And it's kind of that's probably some of the reasons that has led me into now the next sort of, I say, the next part of my journey is, you know, being a teen myself, coming from such a traumatic, you know, background and backstory. You know, we as an ummah have an accountability. We have a duty to teens, and we are failing them on so many levels.
So, okay, tell me about this person and give me some examples of the teens that you deal with, because once we've raised awareness, I want to really focus on how you help them, how people can get in contact with you, but also if you're dealing with a teen in your life because of family circumstances that don't enable that teen to flourish in a healthy way. What can we do with all these teens? How can we not fail them?
So just going back to, you know, so where I'm at the moment is I'm working as a sort of a behaviour specialist in independent provision. So it's actually a provision for those teens who have been excluded from numerous schools, and a lot of them, not all, but many, you know, 99.9% of them are coming from traumatic life events, right? So they're coming from having their fathers in prison, you know, mothers or parents have committed suicide, or they've died at a very young age and they've gone into foster care, and there's just drugs, substance misuse. There's a lot of, you know, backstories for all the children that we're working with at the moment, and the teens in particular. And for me, it was very important that actually in this diversion of my career, so that I can just, if I can just help one child, you know, or just one teen, how I wish I'd been helped. You know, I wish I'd been able to speak to a teacher or pastoral support worker at school and maybe get the help that I was kind of destined for, you know. It's always that thinking. And so the teens that I'm working with, yeah, they come from extremely troubled backgrounds, so they do have extremely challenging behavior, but obviously that's because of what they've experienced and what's happened to them, as opposed to what's wrong with them. And what's shocked me at the moment in particular is some of the cases that, you know, I'm not going to name because of confidentiality, but just a few of the kids that I'm working with that have actually come from Islamic backgrounds, or at least having Muslim parents, regardless of, you know, what they've done, and the parents going into prison. So the teen hasn't got that Islamic lifestyle, doesn't see the religion, but yet has religion here in the heart, you know. And it's so upsetting, because we are so failing on so many levels. So, you know, one particular child that I've been working with, and, you know, dad is in prison, and he doesn't class himself as religious, right? He's got Muslim family, he's been to the mosque on occasions, he's been to Islamic weddings, and here, you know, he's done all of that environment and the culture and the growing up, but dad's in prison, right? And he doesn't follow an Islamic lifestyle at all. And we started to get in some conversations. Obviously, he was quite curious about myself and, you know, how I'm a convert into the religion. And I remember this conversation that we had, and he just said to me, you know, and he's heading for the setup of his father, you know, and he knows that, and he wants to change his life around, you know, he really, really does. But he's not in our independent provision because he hasn't committed some, you know, worrying things. And we were talking, and he was talking about religion, and I said, you don't need to worry about that, because, you know, he goes, yeah, I'm not Muslim, like I'm out of the faith. And I was like, yeah, you don't need to worry about that. And I was like, but
why are you talking
even
about
though
it
you're
then?
not practicing, yeah, even though you're not practicing, and you're not part of the faith, and you don't pray, and you don't do this, and you don't eat this, and you don't eat the right things, and all the rest of it, I said, is it in here? And that was it. He was like, well, yeah, like, of course.
Well, he
You know what I
asked
mean?
you a question. He said, "Oh, do I
Yeah, I
need to
believe
make my
it.
girlfriend convert?" And then you said, "Well, if you're not Muslim, why does she have to convert?" Well, that
Why
was
does she need to
hilarious.
convert? And you don't need to make her. She doesn't need to convert anyway. You don't need to make her convert anyway. However, why are you so concerned about that? You know, you don't. It's like, do I need to ask her, like, if she needs to cover? I was like, no, that's not the way forward. And that's that for me was the defining moment, because it's like, do you know what? It's always here. You've, like you said, you've got that seed here, right? Now, as we were discussing earlier, Selena, right? It's music, it's his environment, and he is absolutely amazing at it. He's fantastic. But again, it's this pressure that we put on our teens to be a certain way, to, you know, make sure that we're not getting into that music because for whatever beliefs we believe it to be haram or not, or whatever. I'm not going into that. That's not about this. But his way of talking about his trauma, he raps about what's happened in his life. He raps about his dad. He raps about his pain. And I will honestly say that every time I hear one of his raps, he's on YouTube, I sit and I cry and I cry.
But my
And
frustration
he's calling out.
my frustration is that we're human. We're going to sin. You know, the level of that sin is down to us, but we're going to sin. No one's going to get through life clean, you know, and sometimes you need to pick your battles. So rather this kid be allowed to just rap and get it off his chest than him go and do something like 100 times worse.
Yeah. And it's sad because, you know, he'll say to me, well, I can't rap if I'm, you know, if I'm religious, and I can't do this if I'm religious, and I can't do this if I'm religious, and I can't do this. And there's so much pressure on what he can't do
Yeah.
that he's lost his identity of who he actually is. And, you know, and I was saying to him just literally, you know, a few weeks ago, I said to him, right, do you know what, you're so good at what you do, you're so good, and you rap from the heart, like you rap from trauma, and anybody who listens to it will have that connection to you, and you're calling out for help, you know. And in one of his raps he mentions, you know, and I can say this publicly because his raps about on YouTube and public, and he raps and he says, you know, when I'm arrested and I'm sent to prison because that's my life destined for me, can you just pray to my Lord? And it's like, wow, you know, it hit me like a brick when I heard it, because
it gives you chills that he's mapped out his life, you know,
but yet he's still using the name of his Lord.
Yeah, he's not forgotten Allah. Yeah,
you
it's
know.
so
And it's and I just sit. Go on, sorry, Celine.
I was just sorry, there is a delay, and like this is by no means professional. This is just about being real and getting awareness out there. Allah mentions the seed, you know, the salt grain. He said, if there's a grain of salt, you will be saved. If there's a grain of salt worth of faith, you will be saved. Now, isn't it amazing that Allah hasn't forgotten about that grain of salt worth of faith, but we as humans disregard it all the time, and we forget about it, and we look at all the things that our Muslim children and Muslims are not doing, and we don't look at the things that they are doing. And so for me, this young man, inshallah, we need to make dua for him. And you know, so how are you helping him? What's going on?
Allah guide him. So at the moment, I'm encouraging his rap because it's his expression, right? Regardless of the concept and what we believe, it's his way of expressing. And I truly believe that with the right role modeling in place, his rap will go into something like, you can say, nasheeds, like something that's a lot more, I don't even know the word, a bit more religious, I guess, not quite so, you know, because his rap's got, you know, bad language. And I said to him the other day, I said, could you make me a rap removing the language? And he was like, huh? No, because it's typical, like, you know, teens like, really? Do you know what that would sound like if I removed it? You know, they don't got that concept that actually you'd still sound just the same as you do without it. So I was like, so I've given him a challenge to actually create me one of his raps without the language in it.
So this is where we need to manipulate him a little bit. Maybe say to him that I love your raps, but my children can't listen to it because they're too little. So can you think of a rap that you can do removing the bad words so that my kids can listen to how amazing you are?
Yeah. And do you know what? Do you know what was so heartwarming was that he was like, you actually you listened to it. I was like, yeah, I listened to it. You know, that shock of, you listened as a Muslim woman to one of my raps and the language just went over your head. Yes, it went over my head because I'm not there to judge you, to condone you, to criticize you. I'm there to listen to what's in here. And I was very conscious when I was listening to listen to the name of Allah and to see if you were talking about your Lord, and it was in there. So I wasn't, and he was so surprised, and so now I talk to him, I'm like, how are you getting on with the rap? You know, keep with it, keep going. You know, and mentioning things like, you know, other people, you know, other nasheed artists that you know, teens will listen to. You know, sometimes we have to, that the more that we're in denial of what our kids can, and you know, can the life journeys that can be set up for them, whether Allah, you know, Allah is the best of planners, Allah knows, you know, but the more that we're in denial that, you know, oh, my son needs to go to madrasa, my son's reciting Quran every night, my son's this, my son's that, my son's this, my son's that. Sometimes we have to be a bit more real with our kids. We're living in a dunya, we're living in a society where we know what's going on, we know the context of the substance misuse, we know everything, you know, we're all terrified, you know, we just talked about the James Bolger. There is so much happening around us that we have to stop being in denial to actually, what are our kids up to? You know, what are we, what conversations are we having with them?
Absolutely. It's having that openness and having that I watched Will Smith's Red Table with Jada Pinkett is amazing because he has this circle of safety where anything can be said, anything can be emitted, and there'll be no judgment. There'll be no consequences. It will just be a space to say. And so from what I'm hearing from you, in order to help our teens, we need to come to common terms, even if that means we disagree with some of the things they're doing. We need to basically structure a relationship with them built on mutual respect, because when the authoritarian part of your parenting is over and done with, around the age of 10, 9, 11, if you're lucky, the parenting style has to change, because you can't hold authority over an 18-year-old, or a 17-year-old. You can't have the same go to bed, it's 9 o'clock, you can't have that with them. So it's mutual respect, it's coming to common terms, and it's also having that safety net. So like I'm just going to be one of those parents where, we were watching, me and my husband, we were watching the program I Am Kate, which is about Caitlyn Jenner, who is a very famous transgender woman. And strange, there's going to be a lot of judgment about what I'm about to say, but I was watching it because I wanted to understand who they were and what their journey was about. And one of the things I said to my husband, I said, I don't think I can ever be one of those mums that could disown their child no matter what they did. Like if it was in the, like, because we had the same conversation around the James Bulger children, like if John Venables was my son, would I still be able to be his parent? And I think the answer would be yes. That doesn't mean I accept what he did, but I'd still be his mum, because if there's a chance, because for me, it's about saving that person. So if I remove my parenting, if I remove myself as a parent, how is that going to ever the potential for that person to grow into a functioning member of society eventually, or a functioning member of the prison, if that's where their life is supposed to be? There's less chance of that if I remove myself as a parent. There's more chance of that if I stay. That doesn't necessarily mean I agree with what they've done. But so in the case of like transgender or homosexuality, I'm not in the business of disownership, because I just think you're their route back to the deen, you're their route back to Islam, and how can that route stay open if you cut that off? So
well, this is the issue, isn't it? When you look at the case that that I'm talking about, who I'm working with at the moment, he has been cut off from all religious aspects. He said, when I used to go to the mosque, I used to play up. So, everybody was like, oh, that's the naughty one. That's the one that's going to end up in prison. That's the one that's going to follow his dad's path. That's the one. So he was written off, as far as I'm concerned, from a very early age by his own surroundings, by his own ummah, and we have an issue here where if our children are not showing the pious path, are we just quickly writing them off and disowning them? And I just find it very, very challenging that actually he needs the ummah more now than he's ever going to need the ummah at this point of his life, where his direction, he's 15, if I remember rightly, we were around that age, his direction of his path is going to go one way or the other right now, so he needs his ummah more than ever. And there is not one person that he sees as a role model in this ummah, and for me that's really, really sad.
Inshallah, we're going to find him one. Inshallah, we're going to find him one,
and that's my goal.
So we have to stop abandoning these children when they've hit rock bottom. So we have to stop doing that and face the ugliness with them, because there's a better chance of facing the ugliness with them, of them recuperating, than if we just leave them to their own devices. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to hurt, because you know what Allah wants. And well, for the most part, we know what Allah wants, and we know how Allah wants us to live. These children are not going to do that straight away. So we're going to have to face we talk about facing the music. We're going to have to face the ugliness, because music tends to be pretty and happy. Face the ugliness with them, hold their hand through their sins and their sinning, and stand up with them and say, listen, whatever you're going to do, we're not going to abandon you. we hope you make the right choice, but if you don't make the right choice, we're not going to abandon you. And so, you know, I think from what you're saying is,
we need to lay off the Islamic pressure and preaching that goes on. You know, you're always here
bashing.
when the time is right, and I'm sure many of you, and I'm sure many of you've heard, you know, the whole a Muslim is how you role model. Islam is not about the person, it's about how the person behaves. And you know, and you see all these quotes and all these preaching about how you act is how people are going to see Islam. Well, actually, how you're acting when your team's coming to you is also going to determine their rebellious side. And as much as, yes, we need to constantly remind them of the sins and the retribution that they may get, and Allah only knows that anyway. But we also have to be like, okay, so let's get into this place with you. Let's get into this space with you so that I can see where you're coming from. So when I got into his rapping space, wow, you know, it was deep, it was traumatic, and it was a cry for help. Now, had I kept dismissing him, as many people have in his circle, because that's not halal, you know,
it's
that's
not
the right thing in the language, then how can you get into his space? Now, later on, if I've built that trust, that rapport, he trusts me, he knows that I'm not there just to convert him into this pious imam, or, you know what I'm saying, like, then he will gradually come around, like he's gradually coming around to asking me more questions and to wanting to know more and wanting to be comfortable with me and sit with me and talk to me. But that wasn't going to happen if I just said, I can't listen to that. You know that's not acceptable, right? But I wanted to get into him.
Get into his mind so that you can only try and guide him. You know, it's not for you to save him, because that is the responsibility and the qadr of Allah. So you can only try and be the vessel that Allah sends. Absolutely. So I was just thinking, is there somewhere teenagers can go where they're not being...
what? This is the issue.
That's free, because let's face, they don't have any money. Is there somewhere where can they go online via Zoom? Is there somewhere they can go and just say, I'm doing this? Because you know what? I met a beautiful Muslimah. She was lovely, and she knew the Quran. And that's the only thing you're allowed to be jealous about. And I was so jealous, and I was like, oh, you know, alhamdulillah. And she's an ustada as well. She's got loads of children, mostly boys. And then the subject came up of dating, and she didn't mean to be offensive, but I made a comment. I can't remember what I said. And she turned around and she went, oh, so you would let your child date? And she said it to me in that tone. And I turned around to her and I said, so you think all 6 of your children are not dating? And she said, no, they're not. And I said, can you say that with absolute certainty? Whether it's dating on WhatsApp or online or physically, can you say hand on heart that your children are completely perfect and they're not doing something behind your back that you don't know about? And she said, yeah, absolutely. And in my head, subhanAllah, I was like, I felt sorry for her children, because if they are struggling with a sin, or if they're struggling with the nafs, they don't have the space to come. And I said to her, it's not that I'm okay with my child dating, I'm just not naive. So I would rather my daughter, and I'm going to talk about my daughter, because at the end of the day, we talk about sons dating more, isn't it? Because, you know, it's more of an acceptable thing, isn't it? You know, that sons will be sons. Rubbish. If my daughter came up to me and said, Mum, I've met this boy, hopefully she'll say he's Muslim. Hopefully, inshallah, you know, he's Muslim. I like him, right? And he's in school. Dude, do I really think that I'm going to have any control over that situation? Of course I'm not. So what I was trying to say to this sister was, he can come round and watch a movie with us. I'll drop you at the cinema and pick you up. I'll drop you at the bowling alley and pick you up. You can eat. He can come and eat dinner with us. You can't. I disagree with you going to his house, because, you know, I don't know how present the parents are going to be, but I will support. And if the feelings grow, then we'll just do a quick nikah. It doesn't matter how old you are. We'll do a quick nikah, and so it's halal, you know. But I would rather facilitate the lesser of the evils that could occur than push my child to a point where they'd have to lie, and they're going to do it anyway. They will find the space and the time to do it, you know. And so I want my children to feel heard, and I want them to know that I'm going to walk with them and do it to the most halalist way possible, because it's so hard in the West. So yeah, so where do
yes, in the West, exactly. We're not living in those societies where, you know, unfortunately we're in a society where these things are going to be happening, and the fact that we are still very much in denial of this is very, very concerning. And it's exactly as you said, Sam, where can they go? I've not found a space where actually teens would feel even comfortable in even saying what you know, like, and they certainly wouldn't make themselves present online in like a support group for teens. You know, I could be wrong.
Where do these kids go?
Like there's this support group. Like where, you know?
Where do they go? So like support groups are even on a Zoom where you can turn, unless it's a Zoom we create where cameras are off, and they can just talk without, you know, they can change their name on the Zoom, maybe something like that. But
it's getting them in. It's getting them in.
Yeah, but I mean, you've got the Samaritans and you've got the Child Line, and these are great, but they're the only places. Bernardo's, I think, are great as well when it comes to
and you've got Young Minds and mental
Young
health.
Minds and mental, So let's make a list of where. So if anyone's going to watch this, I can actually put this on the list underneath. They can go to Young Minds, they can go to Bernardo's, they can go to Child Line, they can go to what was the other one we mentioned? I forgot the charity. I've just mentioned it as well. It will be on the replay. So there's all these places that they can go, but they need consistent free help, because your mental health should not be held to ransom with your bank account, you know. And I'm going to say something that will annoy a lot of coaches and therapists out there. And you know what? No one can work for free. I get that. All people need to earn money and pay their bills. And I respect that. But I see a lot of coaches going, oh my God, I made 10K this month, 15K this month. And you know what? Power to you. You know, I'm not one for stunting, you know, anyone in their growth of their business. I'm a businesswoman myself. You know, go for it. But I was actually heavily criticized for saying, I don't like, and I love the person, I love everyone, and they've, you know, but I did take it as a criticism, not as a nasty critique from the person that gave it, because I love that person dearly, but it felt like a criticism, like, what's wrong with charging what you believe your value is? And I said, and in my mind, I was like, well, I know my value, but the question is what about the person who doesn't realize what their value is? So, for example, a dress. Everyone knows I'm the CEO of Little Robes Royale. The amount of times I've taken a hit on a dress or on an outfit. Yes. Could it be a sob story? Absolutely. Majority of the time, the dresses sell for a profit. Alhamdulillah, that's Allah's blessing. But now and again, I work to budget, or I work to maybe below a budget. And I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to help people. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having flexibility in what you charge and who you charge. So, you know, if there's I have,
absolutely.
I told you I fell into coaching by accident, had a few people that I've had conversations with, and they literally said, look, we want to pay you for your time, because you give us a lot of your time and it's for free. So I'm not an official coach. I don't pertain to be one. And I literally said, they said, right, we want to pay you. And I agreed a price with them. There are a lot of people I help for free, because I don't know, you know, I just don't believe that if you are suffering with mental health issues, that your bank balance, you know, the amount of mental health you have
It
should be
should
based
never
on what's
be a
in your brain.
barrier. No.
No.
Yeah, it should never be a barrier, you know, and I can so relate to you, Selena. You know, the amount of times people go to me, but you've got an award, you're BAM, you should be charging this, you should be worth millions. It's like, no, actually, I charge, you know, what I feel I can charge, and it's negotiable. And then I run a free monthly women's circle for child sexual abuse survivors, and it's free because that's where my passion lies. And you know, it's not saying, like you said, it's not devaluing those that can charge, it's not devaluing or criticizing those. You know, we have to earn, you know, we have to live. But yeah, you know, you make a judgment and you make a call. And you know, with the teens that I'm working, you know, they wouldn't be able to afford support. They wouldn't be able to afford it. And why would they even want to consider that? You know, they're out there on county lines on drugs, substance misuse, and they're just finding their way. Why would they be considering, oh yeah, I need to go and spend such and such amount on a counselling session? It's not, you know, it's not fit for purpose, if you like.
No, absolutely.
But what we need to be doing is finding, I don't know, I mean, how do we start is one of those, always one of those questions, you know what I mean, like, where do we begin? But we have to begin somewhere, and between, you know, the you know, we can't keep putting off these subjects, that our kids are not going to end up in a gang, that our kids are not going to end up killing somebody. We had it in London recently. You know, our Muslim kids are not completely innocent, and as much as we really keep making dua for all of our young children to be on the right path and that Allah is going to protect them, the reality is that that's not always possible. And the sooner we start making places and, I don't know, the environment more comfortable for a teen to say, do you know what, I'm on drugs, or I've taken these drugs, or
I tried
I'm getting involved in a gang, and
I slept with someone,
or I'm getting involved in a gang,
yeah,
and I think I'm coming out of my, I think I'm getting out of my depth. Because a lot of the time, especially with the kids that I'm working with, the teens that I'm working with, is that they've gone in too deep, and they can't get out, right? And now they have, but on the other side of it, they don't have anybody they can tell that they've got in too deep and they can't get out. So the life is destined.
So okay,
see,
and that's when it becomes a vicious circle. So I think this has been a really productive talk. It feels just like a Zoom for just you and me. It doesn't feel like this is going to go on social media. But I think, look, I've got an email. I've got an email, selena@neuroinc.com, and I've called it Neuro Inc. because neuro is anything to do with the brain, and ink is the pen that we write with, and it's holier than the martyr, and it's also a means of communication. So I think if anyone, I'm going to actually have it on when I post this up, it's going to be on the top. Mayameen, I would really love if you could give me your email that you're happy to share, if you're happy to share it.
Because I would absolutely, you know, if there's parents that are, you know, that are going to be,
they don't know what to do,
that is my teen, then reach out to me, because it's something that, you know, I'm very passionate about at the moment. It's something that, like I said, that personally I wish somebody had done for me. I wish I'd had somebody that I could, even if it was, you know, at school or whatever, in the mosque or whatever. And for me, like now, it's like, after working with the teens that I'm working with, and just a few at the moment who are, you know, from a religious background, it's like, come on, you know, we need to have these conversations. And, you know, alhamdulillah, since I've started doing what I'm doing in the teen work, you know, I have had mums reach out to me on Facebook and go, do you know what, my teen is like really fine lining at the moment, what can I do? And that's great, you know, and that's what we need. We need the parents to come forward and stop being in denial. Like you said, stop kind of covering it over and hoping that, you know, with dua and prayer and constant preaching it's going to change it. Of course, make dua. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will only be the one to change it. But if you're not going to be proactive,
make dua in the middle of the night. Absolutely, make dua in the middle of the night. Get up in the third section of the night. Give sadaqah. There's all these you know, the habits of Ramadan. I've said this on Women's AM so many times. The habits of Ramadan need to be carried over into everyday life after Ramadan.
But be proactive too. Get the help that you need. Stop putting it under the carpet on the hope that it's going to disappear overnight.
It's not going to disappear. It's going to get worse.
We are in trouble.
100%.
And this is where we are in trouble.
So if we have the 2 email addresses at the top, we can't promise that we can help everyone, but we can certainly point you in the right direction. And as the parents, It's your responsibility to fight, to keep fighting, that it's your child, they're your responsibility, and Allah created that child especially for you. So in it, there's clearly a barakah in there, in it for you. So yeah, so okay, I think we've covered a lot of topics today, and I'm so glad it's been a heavy, I'm so glad that we just kind of went with the flow and breathe.
Yeah, and you know what, if anyone, you know, I'm hoping that this does reach an audience for you, Selena. I really hope it does, regardless of how, you know, unprofessional it may come across. You know, we are who we are, aren't we, at the end of the day? But if there are topics that we need, that people want to hear about, then get them, you know, send them over. Get in touch
and we'll cover them.
You know, we need to cover them. We have to bring people in, and we have to speak about it. And all I want to just sort of say on a final note is, you know, be that voice for your teen, right? Regardless if you're worried about the judgment, and oh my God, he's going off the path, and oh, I can't talk to the sister about that. Okay, you know, I've spoken about my past, my experience. You know, there is no judgment. You know, you need to reach out to somebody, and if you don't, then you're doing a dishonor to your own. You know, and our ummah is in dire need right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I just make, on my final note, I just want to say, especially to certain families that are bound by culture, please stop caring about what Auntie G is going to say, or what this family or the neighbors down the road are going to say. Because let me tell you something, on the Day of Judgment, we have our 3 deeds, right? And your children are going to be one of those deeds, not Auntie down the road, or my cousin twice removed who's going to look at me in a judgmental way when we attend the next wedding. Like, who cares about those people? Those people on the Day of Judgment are going to be worried about their own back garden. So worry about your child, and live their truth, and stand up and say, you know what? They have fallen off the wagon, and what? And we're doing this, this, and this, and this to make sure that they are fully supported. So
absolutely,
we need to start peeling the layers of the onion and stop caring about what people think, and brushing our issues under the rug to save face when you're losing faith. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And you know, it's one of those things we're going to see time and time again, where, you know, we all want pious children, mashallah, alhamdulillah, may Allah bless us with you know, the most righteous children. But the more that you keep acting that your child is so pious, and actually you're breaking the barriers of entry to be able to have any conversations. And you know, the reality is that it's not what it seems, and I'm working in it, and I can see it, and I just think, wow, we've missed the gap here, you know, massively.
We've missed the boat.
You know, inshallah, inshallah, there's always a chance to do better, to change things. And I think that the more we start having these real conversations, that you're, you know, the platform that you're providing to have this, that's when the change will start.
Inshallah.
You know, and sitting back, like you said, sitting with Auntie G having your dinner is not going to be the answer to it.
Although Auntie G's tend to be the best cooks, let's put it out there. But she's not going to be there on the Day of Judgment.
And I never refuse food.
No, neither do I. Well, sis, you know what? Thank you so much for making the time. You've had a long day. You've been at work. You've done your yoga class, one of which, if you're doing them by Zoom, I will be attending, because I really want to get into yoga. I'm going to be rubbish at it, but I'm going to try it, inshallah. Thank you so much, Mayameen.
You're welcome.
It's been an absolute honor and pleasure, and inshallah, I'm sure we're going to do a few more of these. I think there's going to be loads more. I have that feeling.
I think there's probably going to be, just bring the topics in, guys, and we will get on it.
Okay, so
brilliant. Jazakallah khair. Thank you. May Allah bless you, Selena, for the platform.
Oh, alhamdulillah. What platform? I've got I have 0 followers. I just want to, you know what, if one of these conversations helps someone, then whatever about the followers, alhamdulillah. Okay, assalamu alaikum, sis.
Assalamu alaikum.